So, a lot of recent things have been taking place, and I'm looking into something that says the federal agents have released a report that accurately confirms that 94% of the terrorist attacks in the USA since the 1980s, or since 1980 itself, have been non-Muslims. Now, I've always loved Muslims. I always thought they were some stand-up guys, especially the NOY and FOY. But there's certain things that didn't resonate well to me about seeing the feds release a report like that. So now I'm thinking that it's fake news, and I'm thinking that, I don't know, it sent my mind a few different places. And I don't blame one Muslim, or all Muslims, excuse me, for what one Muslim does. You got your Sufis, your Shiites, your Orthodox, or those who follow what may be classified as Sunni. And they're different from the Muslims you might find right here in Chicago, right? So I didn't speculate on the Muslims that I remember from attending African festivals and things like that as being like the same Muslims as the radical jihadists, or even if those are considered Sufis or not. I'm not quite sure who's different from the other, but when they released this report saying that 94% of the terrorist attacks in the United States were by non-Muslims, I had to step back and look. Whoa, for real? Okay. And, because I've always affirmed that I've been in support of Islam just as a black man. But, long story short, after reading this article or seeing this on a post or somewhere, I forgot where I saw it, it just made me want to drop some knowledge about a guy I remember who was locked up. Good friend of mine. Known him my whole life. If you know me, and you know where I'm from, and you see this, you're going to know who I'm talking about. This guy did almost 20 years. Hard time. Didn't make much money as it was said on the streets, but he did some hard time. So, four different things happened that I want y'all to be aware of, because I want to know where my friend stands with the Muslims. But I wasn't going to ask him myself, and he had actually pointed out to me the question when he was telling me about certain events in his life. And he said to me, and the words were pretty much like, where do you think I stand with the Muslims? And he's not, I don't think he's Islam, unless he took his Shahada a couple years ago. I don't believe that you can be loyal to your deen just because you took your Shahada in a year or a couple months. I don't think that really makes you loyal to your dean. And when he goes on to say to me that he was, during this time of incarceration, he was assaulted 3 times. One for talking against the Ku Klux Klan and the Hells Angels. One time for, I think the guy said that he just didn't like the way he looked or something like that. I couldn't remember what he told me that guy hit him for, but these were assaults by officers though. I remember the most recent though, he didn't know where that came from either. But after 3 of these things happened to him, it was almost as if like he could not understood why Allah was protecting him, but not really standing by him every day and making his face known to him. I mean, he could watch certain things on the news about Islam, and he could go walk down to the mosque. The mosque wasn't too far from us no matter where we lived. But basically, let me just get into these stories right quick. The day before he was sentenced and ready to go upstate or go to the state, there's usually the jails where people are arrested at are in the cities, and those are just where the bookings is at, central bookings and the county jails. But when you go further up, those are the jails that hold people for a longer amount of time. And when he was just about to be ready to go upstate after they sentenced him, or right before they sentenced him, the cops beat him down for talking about, why you locking me up? I'm just a regular individual. Why don't y'all go out there and lock up the Ku Klux Klan? Why don't y'all go up there and lock up the Hells Angels? Now, if y'all know anything about the Hells Angels and the Ku Klux Klan, you know, I knew my friend was right for saying that, but, you know, these cops, they were all tattooed up and with the swastikas in there. And they were all white. And so they just blacked his eye, hit him a bunch of times, threw him on the ground. And when he went to sentencing next morning, they hit him with 20 years. They gave him the maximum for whatever crime they said that he did. So he served the max time on that, or at least 85% of that time, as it said you have to serve once you're given the max sentence, especially without an appeal. So he served the time on that. But the next morning when they were getting him up to take him away, to take him to the state, after they just beat him down in the city, the World Trade Center was bombed. And it's like I told you, I've always been in support of Muslims, but when he told me that, it kind of like, whoa, you know. So they got him upstate, and the real reason that he said that he was sitting in a mosque when he, or soon after realizing that the World Trade Center was bombed, was because he said he wanted to know where he stood with the Muslims. You know, these white cops just beat him down, and then the World Trade Center got bombed. Now, a lot of people, now according to the Fed's report, the Muslims didn't do it. A lot of people say the Pentagon did it. Why wouldn't the Pentagon have done it? You know, they always oppressing black folks, and it was some people who died in there that were not completely Anglo or completely white, you know, so Who's to say that the Pentagon didn't do it? So he went to the mosque. I think it was Thursday that the place got bombed. He was in the mosque for, everybody know that they usually hold mosque on Friday, and a service called Juma. But during that Juma service, if you're not a Muslim, you can sign up to become a Muslim that day, or you can go through preliminary like screening, so that the mosque can say whether or not you're eligible to become a full-fledged Muslim. So he was there for the next Juma service. Whatever day the World Trade Center was bombed, he was there by Juma. And if you're Muslim, you know that you celebrate, that you're practicing, or there is a Juma service at least once a week. Okay, so it's like I said, no lie. He's at Juma service the week that the World Trade Center was bombed. Like damn near the day after, okay? Because they brought him to a different part of the state, and they asked for his blood, and he didn't want to give it to him, and he just wanted to know what the hell was going on. So he went, maybe, last I heard, he said he went almost 9 to 10 years. It may have been even 11 years without being assaulted again by officers in the state. But when this large Asian, this guy wasn't a Caucasian, he was a large 6'3", muscular, looked like bodybuilder type Asian guy. Caught him one day, and he told me the guy just hit him out of nowhere, said something about him not standing in the right place, but he says the guy hit him so hard it made him sit down, but he said the guy escorted him to the place that they were going because they said he needed an ID. But before he had to take the picture for the ID, he said, as he was like buttoning up his shirt and making himself look presentable for the picture, the guy hit him out of nowhere. And it's like they wanted to put a mark on his face for the picture to see that they were roughing him up there. He said he could never figure out why this guy did that. Even 10 years now, this guy never said why he did it. But he hit him he hit him so hard, it put my boy on his ass for a minute. So he said the real thing that made him understand that this might be God's intervention was because the next couple of days there were so many storms in the Orient and not just regular like storms. They were like storms, catastrophic storms in Asia that wiped out like all kinds of land and farmland, killed hundreds of people. And he said it occurred for the next 4 or 5 days where these storms ravaged through the Orient.
Sure. Translate into which language? Arabic. Привет на следующие 5 дней.
So we really didn't understand where that came from. And he said it must be God, man. He said it really must be Jah. It must be Jah's great power intervening at this point, because he couldn't understand why else Allah would protect him from even a man who was seemingly, he had enough melanin in his skin to be, he couldn't be considered black or African, but, why protect him from somebody like that? And there's always talk about a lot of pedophilia and a lot of immoral sexual acts going on in Asia. But he said that shouldn't have involved him. But the day this guy hit him, he never saw Asia be hit by so many dangerous storms back to back. He said he saw it before, but never so much in like the span of 1 week. So let's get on to the third thing. He was in a place called, he was upstate. He said he came across a bunch of officers and he was trying to find out how to find the yard. And I think he asked one of the officers or something like that. And they decided to throw him on the wall. They took everything out of his pockets, threw everything on the floor, smacked him in his head, kicked him a bunch of times in his kneecaps. He said this time they avoided hitting his plain face. They hit the back of his head, but they didn't hit his face as much as the officers did before. You know, they didn't do something that could have caused a black eye or could have caused anybody to see what they were doing. It was like they almost wanted to make sure nobody could prove that they beat him down, except for the fact they kicked him in his legs so much that his knees swole up to the point where he couldn't walk back up the stairs to his cell. So whatever resonated behind that, you know, we're still trying to find out if he gonna be able to get a lawsuit or whatever. But the next morning, right out of the blue, another slightly catastrophic thing happened. And this time, if anybody has ever heard of it, it was the bombing of the Boston Marathon. You know, a lot of these cops are Irish, so Massachusetts being filled with all of these Irish people and having a very small population of Negroes or Africans or anything that is considered minority was, you know, it was like, he was like, whoa, now why that? But my point is not to say that my friend is being like protected from some higher power who wants to cause destruction against anybody who even can get within 10 feet of him. My point was to ask him, where did he believe he stood with these so-called people who were doing wrong? Now, the first time they beat him up, you got to understand, he was shouting out against guys like the Hells Angels, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazi Germanys. He was telling them, why y'all got me locked up? Why don't you lock them faggots up, you know? And everybody who knows anything about the Hells Angels, you know these guys got a list. The AZ list. If you're on this list, believe me, they're saying they're going to protect you and love you forever for the crimes against humanity that you commit. Because they're about hell and devilishment. So the more devilish the crime, the faster you can reach the AZ list. And they have this monthly listing of people who've done the worst and most heinous crimes. And if you're at the top of this list, you're like considered one of Satan's helpers. So, you know, he speaks out against these kind of guys and they black his eye. And that case gets thrown out because of the bombing of the World Trade Center the very next morning. The other guy, he couldn't believe the devastation in Asia, so he dropped the case himself. And the case that happened with the Boston Marathon bombing, he's never heard anything back when he actually had to have a white doctor examine him, and they said nothing was wrong with the knee, that the knee was fine. But who's to say what happened with that later on? The point of my story is this. If we're talking to my friend and we're asking him or we're explaining to him where he stands with the Muslims or these people who are freedom fighters for justice and honor and truth, what would it be that we would say to him? does the stories that I just told you make you feel like? Who, or anything about this story that makes sense to you? I'd like to hear it. This is Ben George reporting to you live. Talk to y'all later.